Hey friends, this is Karen from Blue Rooster Farm, and I tell you what, our garden is doing so wonderful this year, and we have so much coming out of the garden right now. Today, we are going to continue using some of our cucumbers, and we are going to be making a sweet pickle relish. So if you'd like to see that recipe, stick around. I was out in the garden this morning harvesting some more cucumbers, and man, we've got a lot, and there's a lot still on there, so we're going to have to use up some of them today, and that's why we are going to be making some sweet pickle relish. But also, I finished picking the rest of our zucchini, and we're going to go ahead and get rid of the plants because it's getting too many squash bugs and things, and we want to just get rid of those, burn those plants, and get them out of there. So I'll probably be drying some more zucchini and turning it into a zucchini powder or zucchini flour, and I'm hoping to share that recipe or that video with you on how I do that really soon. We also have peppers, corn. Our second planting of sweet corn is in full swing, so I'm going to have to be freezing that real soon. And then green beans, we're ready to pick some more green beans. Our second crop of green beans is ready to pick. Our peppers are doing great. I'm glad our tomatoes are just putting on a few here and there daily, not overproducing just yet, because I don't have time to do tomatoes too. We've got too much going on. So we're going to do the sweet pickle relish in this video, and then I'll share with you in other videos other things that I do with the rest of my produce. So today, let's talk about our sweet pickle relish. And I've got some cucumbers here. I don't know how many of these cucumbers I'll use for the relish. I'm thinking that I will probably turn some of these into some lime pickle spears, but I've already done a video on lime pickles that's out now. So if you want to see how I turn these cucumbers into crispy, crunchy, sweet lime pickles, check that video out. Those are delicious. And I think I have so many cucumbers that I'm going to have to do something besides relish with these. And so I was thinking that the crispy lime pickles in spears would probably be what I'll make with the extras here. I also harvested some onions, some peppers, and we'll be needing these for our sweet pickle relish. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go clean these cucumbers up, chop them up, and take care of the peppers and the onions, get them all chopped up. I'm going to be using a food processor, and I'm going to put skins and all on the cucumbers. You don't have to peel your cucumbers. I'm going to be chopping the same consistency as my cucumbers, my onions, and my peppers, and I'll bring you back to tell you the quantities you're going to need. So stick around. I have all of my ingredients chopped up. I've put everything through the food processor. A couple of hints: don't overfill your food processor. Just put small amounts each time. That way you won't end up with a puree trying to get the big chunks chopped. So be careful when you put your veggies in. Don't overfill it. Okay? That I know the first time I stuck it in, I'm one who just wants to get it done, so I just fill it up and turn it on. But you're not going to get a lot of chunks chopped up, and trying to, you're going to make some of it more of a puree, and you don't want that. So small amounts in the food processor. Now this recipe that I'm using today is from the Ball Blue Book, and I believe it's 1999. Yes, 1999 is the publishing date on this one, so it's an old one. It is called Sweet Pickle Relish in this one. And so the ingredients are 1 quart of chopped cucumbers, and I am going to be doubling this recipe, so I am going to be using twice the amount of everything. As long as you do it to the same ratio, you're fine. So 1 quart is the single batch. I'm doing a double batch, so I've got 2 quarts of chopped cucumbers. You need 2 cups of chopped onions. I've got 4 cups of chopped onions, and I used red and white. It doesn't matter which kind you use, and yellow, I think, too. So just use whichever kind of onions you have, and you're going to chop them at the same consistency, the same size as your cucumbers. And then it wants you to use 1 cup of chopped sweet green pepper and 1 cup of chopped sweet red pepper. And in our garden, we don't have as many red peppers right now, so I just made sure I had, for this single recipe, you'd need 2 cups of chopped peppers. I just made sure that I had 4 cups of chopped peppers, and they're sweet peppers, different varieties, but there are some red, there are some green, there are some yellow, and that's really just probably to make it look pretty. It would be fine with whatever color your peppers are. And then what we're going to do, the chopping is probably the hardest. We're going to take all of our vegetables that we have chopped, and we are going to put them in a large bowl. Now I use a stainless steel bowl. You can use glass. You can use enamel. You're going to take your onions, put those in there, and your sweet peppers. Now I toyed with the idea of adding a couple jalapenos to make it with a little kick, but I thought, nah, I'll keep them just plain sweet. And then we're going to mix that. So I'm just going to use a big spoon, and we're just going to mix it all together. And this has got a lot of veggies chopped up, and you're going to start seeing some water kind of coming off of it a little bit. And that's okay. We're going to get a lot more water coming off of it when we add the salt. There are different ways of making sweet pickle relish. And I mean, I read through about 10 different ways. It's got about the same ingredients, only the setting time might have been different. The ratio of salt might have been different. Some you just sprinkled salt and let it set. Some you add salt and water and let it set. So there's a whole bunch of different recipes out there. This one is just very simple. So you just kind of mix it up like that. And then you are going to want to use canning and pickling salt. And the reason for that is it doesn't have anything added to the salt. If you were to use the regular table salt, there are some anti-clumping and iodine and stuff like that that's been added to it, and it just doesn't make for as nice of pickles or relishes. But if you only have table salt, that's fine. You can also use pink Himalayan or other natural salts. That would be fine too. So this recipe takes 1/4 of a cup for a single, and since this is a double, I'm going to need 1/2 a cup. Now you're not going to have this salt canned with this relish. You're going to be rinsing this salt off. This salt is acting to pull water and moisture out of your vegetables to let them absorb the vinegar. And that way they're going to be preserved better and have a better taste and even a little bit of a crunch. So we're going to add 1/2 a cup of salt. And we're just going to sprinkle it on there, just like so. And then what we're going to do is we are going to cover this with cold water. So what I'll do is I'll just take cold tap water and make sure I fill it up so everything is able to be covered. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a stir just to get that salt incorporated. Okay, so what you're going to notice your vegetables are going to want to float, and that's fine. Just make sure there's plenty of water in there so that when you do push down, there is plenty of water on top. So there is a lot of water at the bottom. They're just floating. And we're just going to set this just like this to the side. And then what we're going to do is we're going to let it set for 2 hours. So I'm going to set it to the side, and then I'm going to bring you back and we're going to get the brine started. For this relish recipe, you're going to need a very large stock pot. If you don't have a large stock pot that will fit all of the relish ingredients, all those vegetables, then you could divide it into 2 pots. That would be fine too. But having one is the best. I use this old enamel pot, and it is a thin pot, but because this relish isn't something that's going to get scorched on the bottom because most of it will float and the vinegar's on the bottom, I will be stirring it. It won't be on there very often. I like this pot to use for brines and pickles and relishes or liquids because it will heat up a lot faster on my stove. So I'm using this one. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make the brine, and then we're just going to set it aside, let the veggies continue to marinate in the salt, and then in 2 hours we will combine everything together and finish up our relish and put it into cans or jars. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some vinegar. Now this recipe calls for cider vinegar, and I'm going to use a mixture of both. I have another big jug of cider vinegar, but when I looked at it, I could not find the acidity level, and it's made locally. And you need to make sure any vinegar that you're using for pickles or canning needs to have a 5% acidity at least. Some people are saying that some of the acidity that they're finding at the stores is now 4%. So be sure you check your acidity on your vinegar when you purchase it. It should be 5% for canning. So I do have one thing of apple cider vinegar, and this does say 5% acidity on this one. So I'm going to do half and half. It's 2 cups for a single recipe, and so I'll need 4 cups. And so I will be putting a little bit of both. You can choose whichever vinegar you like. Cider vinegar, it would taste really nice. The white vinegar doesn't really have a flavor, so you're going to have your sugar and your cucumbers and your onions and your peppers and your spices doing the main flavoring. So here we go. So we're going to add 2 cups for a single batch, and I'm going to add 4 cups of vinegar. Got my cup right here. And if this has more than 2 cups, and it probably will, there's 2 cups. I'll just use what I have in here. And then I'll top it off with the white vinegar. So I'll just use what's in there. That smells good. So we've got our 2 cups, but I have 4 of vinegar. Then we need 3.5 cups of sugar. Now, that is a lot of sugar, And so there's probably recipes out there that use less sugar, but I am going to follow this recipe to the T. This is something you don't eat a lot of. You might put a spoonful on a hot dog or a spoonful in a salad, but it's not something you're going to eat the whole jar of. So we have to remember that. So it's 3.5 cups for a single batch. So I'm going to add 7 cups of sugar. I've got my sugar. I went ahead and measured it out. And I've got 7 cups of sugar. Remember, a single recipe is 3.5 cups. 7 cups of sugar. And then I'm just going to mix that in with the vinegar. And it won't dissolve completely or anything like that. We'll just give it a mix. Once the heat is added to it after a while, it will dissolve. Now we're going to add some seasoning. Now, you can add whatever seasoning you like to your pickles. That's not going to affect the preserving process, the canning process. This recipe has a tablespoon of celery seed and a tablespoon of mustard seed, and that's all they have for their seasoning. Sometimes I have been known to use just a pickling spice in a little gauze bag that I drop into this mixture, and then when it's warming and heating, the flavors get in there and flavor my brine. But I'm just going to follow the recipe the way it's written because this is good and it's fine. So I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of celery seeds since I am doubling 1, and my celery seed is ground, but that's fine. I've decided to use the celery that went to seed out in my garden. I've decided to try to harvest that celery seed and add it to my herbs. I think that would be great to have my own celery seed. Then we want to have 2 tablespoons for a double recipe of mustard seed. And we're just going to give that a stir. Remember, your cucumbers and onions and peppers will already be salted from the brine that they're soaking in the water and salt brine right now. That is going to be rinsed and drained, but for now, this is all we need for our pickling brine. And I'm just going to set it aside. I'm not going to put it on the heat yet because we've still got about almost 2 hours still to let our relish soak in the cold water. But when 2 hours are up, I'll bring you back, show you how we take care of the relish, and then show you how we prepare it for canning and how we can it. So see you soon. So apparently I didn't turn my microphone on for this section, so I'm going to just do a voiceover for you. So what I'm getting ready to do is I am going to be taking that relish that's been soaking in salt water, and I'm going to drain it and then rinse it at this point. The 2 hours have passed, and so now I need to get it rinsed before we continue. So I've got a colander here, and I want to check and make sure that the holes in the colander are not too big for my relish, because I certainly don't want to drain off all my relish. So we're going to try just a little bit in there to see, and I've got a bowl underneath there to catch it, and we're going to see if we are losing relish through these holes. So I'm bringing it back and forth, and underneath there the water's discolored, but there's no particles that are very big in there, so our relish is fine. That's just the water that has changed colors as it's been sitting in salt. So we're going to go ahead and add the rest of it here, draining off all that salt water. And while this was sitting, and after we had made our brine, I went ahead and got all my jars ready. I've washed them in hot water. I've washed the lids in hot water. I've got the bands out. I've got the ladle and the funnel and everything I need to be canning this, because this won't take long after rinsing this to get it heated up and ready to jar up. So I use that 2 hours to get things done so that it'll make the process a little easier. So here I'm just going to run cold water over it and just stir it around, making sure that relish is rinsed really thoroughly. We don't want it to be a salty relish, so we're going to rinse it nice and thoroughly. And you can taste it at any time to see if it's to your liking. If it's too salty, just keep rinsing. If you've rinsed all the salt off, you might need to add some more salt. So as soon as it's rinsed to your liking, you are going to strain off all of the water, and you want to get as much of the water off as you can, because you're going to replace that water with the vinegar brine solution, and that will give your relish the great taste. So just dry it the best you can by pushing it through the colander, and once you're satisfied with how dry it is, you are ready for the next step. So I think that looks good to me. Let's move on. My brine is simmering. My relish has drained very nicely. I'm ready to put it into this pan, and we're going to simmer it for 10 minutes after it comes back to a simmer. And we'll see if we can do this without having any splatter. Whoops, there went a little. Get all of it in there. Okay, that's good. And we're going to give it a little stir. I'm going to turn the heat up just a little bit to get the simmer going again. A little spill right there, but I think it's far enough from the flame not to be too concerned. Okay, once this comes to a simmer, we'll let it simmer for 10 minutes, and I will bring you back then. Right now I have my steam canner right here, and because this is going to be going into jars hot, we want our water and our canner to be hot as well. So if you're using a water bath method, you'll want to go ahead and get your water boiling at this point and just turn it on, and as you're canning your jars, it will start to boil and should be ready when you get your jars ready to put in. Okay, I'll bring it back after 10 minutes. I've just removed our relish from our burner. It's boiling hot still. It's simmered for 10 minutes. We are ready to jar it up. So I'm just going to use pint size and smallmouth lids or smallmouth jars. So you can use whatever size you want. This usually I can relish in the pint-sized jars just because you don't usually go through that much. If I had a quart, it would be in the refrigerator for a long time. So, and it's also, if I want to gift any of this, it's a nice size to gift. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put this into our jars. and get it all evenly distributed. I want to make sure I'm stirring it so I don't have just the relish and no juice. I want to make sure I have equal amount of juice in all of them. And we need to have, let's see what kind of headspace, a 1/4 inch headspace. So I think this one is a 1/4 inch. We're going to take something to debubble with. I'm just using a wooden skewer and just kind of swirling it around. And then we're going to take some vinegar and wipe the rim. Let me grab that. So I've got a little vinegar right here, just white vinegar, and I'm going to put a paper towel, dab it in there, and wipe these rims. Now, this is vinegar and sugar solution, and so the sugar is pretty sticky, and so that's why I'm using the vinegar. You could just wipe it off. That would be fine, but I just find that I have better luck using a little vinegar. Then I'm going to take my cleaned lids and my ring. And you don't have to sterilize your jars. You don't have to sterilize your lids, because now they tell us that as long as you are processing for 10 minutes in a water bath, a steam canner, or more, 10 minutes or more, it will sterilize while it's canning. And so you don't have to sterilize any of this equipment, but you do want to have it clean. So I always wash it really well in hot soapy water so that it's very clean. Remember, we do fingertip tight on the lid or on the ring. And sometimes you have to back off and check and make sure you got it on the jar correctly. And so there is our jar that's ready to go in. So right now you can probably hear the whistling. That's my steam canner. It is all hot. These jars are hot, so the water that you're canning in needs to be hot. If you're using a water bath, have your water bath boiling. If you're using a steam canner, have the water in there boiling. I'm going to get these all canned up and we'll see how many we have, and I'll bring you back. I have 8 pints that are full pints that I'm going to be canning. I had about a half a pint left that we'll just put a lid on and stick in the refrigerator. And don't hesitate to taste to make sure that you like your relish. I tasted before I started putting them in jars just to make sure that I didn't need to add something else like another season. And always be sure you taste, because if you don't like it before you put it in the jars, you're not going to like it after it's canned. So this is really good. It's very sweet. It's got a big tang. It's got a really good flavor with all those veggies mixed together. So this will be perfect for anything that you'd be putting relish in. Perfect relish. So we're going to put this in the steam canner. If you don't have a steam canner, use a water bath canner. Have the water boiling when you put these in, because these are hot right now. Bring the water back to a boil. Once it starts boiling, we are actually going to process these for 15 minutes. I know I told you 10 earlier, but when I looked at the recipe, this was for half pints. We have full pints, so I had to do some research and find some other recipes that were tested. And if you're putting a cucumber pickle relish, I saw some that were just 10 minutes still for pints, but I saw a couple that were 15 minutes. So we're going to err on the side of safety, and we're going to process them for 15 minutes. So we're going to put these in. After it comes back to a boil, you're going to process for 15 minutes. Once 15 minutes is up, you're going to turn your heat off and just kind of let it set for about 10 minutes just to kind of settle down. Then remove it from your canner and set it on some kind of a dry cloth, a mat, something, but not directly on your counter. And then leave them alone and don't touch them. And the next day, you can take your bands off, you can wash them, and then you can put them into your pantry. And yes, you do need to wash your jars, because especially when you're doing something like this, I noticed my jars have a little sticky on them from when I was putting the relish in there. And if you leave that sticky stuff on there, or when you take off your lids, you might notice there's some sticky stuff on your lids inside that band, then that's going to cause possible mold. So you don't want that to be growing on the outside of your jars. It's okay, it's not going to affect the inside of your jars, but it doesn't look attractive, and no one's going to want to eat something that has mold growing on the outside. So make sure that you have cleaned your jars really good before you put them in your pantry. And one of the questions I sometimes get is, do you leave your bands on, or do you take them off? What's the correct way? You take your bands off. Make sure you take them off. You don't want to keep them on, because then you're going to have a chance of a false seal, and that means it appears to be sealed, but it's not really sealed. If it's off, if your ring is off, you will easily be able to tell if something starts happening inside that jar, and you can easily tell that that lid on top, that flat, is not adhered to the jar anymore, and you know to get rid of that stuff that's inside the jar, because you can't eat that if it hasn't sealed. So test your seals by taking the bands off, clean your jars, then make sure you leave the rings off and put them in your pantry. And these will last for years. As long as your seal is okay, the food inside your jar is okay. Now, the quality of the food may go down a little bit. It may have, it may lose some of its color. The texture may change just a little bit, but the food inside should still be safe. So I hope you enjoyed this video on making sweet pickle relish. If you have any questions or any comments, please leave them below. Also, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would really appreciate that. And I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.